Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here. Just wanted to hop on the feed real quick and share an episode of our newest podcast series called The Composter, hosted by Jayne Merner Senecal, with whom listeners of the podcast will be familiar. I did an interview with Jayne in early 2021 about her farm and compost operation up there in Rhode Island, and she is just a wealth of knowledge. The Composter podcast is going to be dedicated to commercial compost production, and it is really, really great, especially with Jayne at the helm. I'm super excited about this series, and I know you all will be too. So that's enough from me. I'll let Jayne introduce the show, and I hope you will subscribe to the Composter wherever you are listening to this. Otherwise, thanks y'all.
Welcome to the Composter, a podcast for farmers and composters. I'm your host and fellow composter, Jayne Merner Senecal. Join me in practical conversation between industry professionals and farmers with a passion for producing high-quality compost. We are going to dig deep into the science, technology, and art of compost production so that we as composters can help enliven the world's soils. Hey everybody, Farmer Jayne here. Welcome to the Composter. In today's episode, I had the absolute pleasure of chatting with Carla Castegnero, co-founder and president of AgRecycle, Pennsylvania's largest composting operation headquartered in Pittsburg. AgRecycle was one of the pioneers in the composting industry, founded in 1991. Carla has a wealth of knowledge on making high-quality compost with a wide variety of feedstocks. She's a seasoned composter and was the recipient of Rodale Institute's Organic Pioneer Award in 2013. I learned a ton by talking with her, and I think you will too. Today's episode of The Composter is brought to you by BioCycle. Founded in 1960, BioCycle is the go-to resource on composting, organics recycling, anaerobic digestion and biogas, end product markets, policies and regulations, and community outreach and education. It's where I go to keep up with composting news. I have learned a tremendous amount by signing up for the BioCycle Connect, the twice-monthly free e-newsletter on BioCycle's website, biocycle.net. I highly recommend checking it out. This episode is also brought to you by Komptech. Today, more than ever, people are discovering the benefits of compost in gardens, landscapes, and agriculture. However, as composting awareness grows, so does consumer demand. As a result, commercial composters are seeking ways to increase year-round production while maintaining high levels of quality in their compost. For many, the solution is a better process. For over 25 years, Komptech has worked with scientists, agriculture experts, and customers to develop a 4-step process that produces healthy, contaminant-free compost while optimizing commercial production efficiency. This process is known as shred, turn, screen, and separate. You can learn more about the Komptech process at comtechamerica.com/composterpodcast. And Komptech is with a K. While you're there, request a complimentary consultation to discover if the Komptech process is right for your commercial operation. On our farm, Earthcare Farm, screening used to be the bottleneck in our process. We now have a Komptech M2 multi-star screener, and it has made our composting process much more efficient. Komptech America is proud to support the Composter podcast and is ready to help you make the most of a great opportunity. And now, back to the show. Good morning, Carla. It's Jayne.
How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm well also.
I'm super excited to talk to you today.
Well, don't be, I could let you down, Jayne, so.
I don't think so. Well, welcome to the Composter. It's this new podcast about making compost of high quality. And I'm so excited to have you because you have so much experience in this field. Could you tell us a little bit about your compost facility, AgRecycle, and when you got started, your role, anything you want us to know about it, where you're located?
Sure. AgRecycle is the oldest composting company in Pennsylvania. And we started in 1992. And our facilities, we have several facilities all surround Pittsburg. So we're in the western part of the state.
That's awesome. And what's your role at the compost facility?
I am the founder and president of AgRecycle.
Awesome. Are you still active today?
Absolutely. I'm not that old, Jane.
I didn't think you'd be old, but maybe you have lots of minions.
No. I do have wonderful staff members. Several of whom have been with us over 20 years. But I used to say I go to the office every day, but in this hybrid world, I'm just going to say I work every day because, sometimes it's at home, sometimes it's at the office, sometimes I am at a composting site, sometimes I'm at the distribution center, but I do work every day.
That's awesome. And how many yards a year approximately does AgRecycle make? I should have done that. We take in about, I'm going to say we don't really we take in probably just under 200,000 cubic yards. Okay. And then that breaks down a bunch and
right.
Who knows it then, maybe 20,000 yards or something.
Right. So
Yeah.
Probably a little more than that, but yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. That's good. Large scale.
Yes. I think we're at the bottom end of large scale or the top end of medium scale.
Yep, I hear you. And your higher quality, you guys have a real eye for quality, is what the word on the street.
Yes, I am fanatical about this. So this is jumping ahead on the question list that you gave me, but AgRecycle has always operated under a very different economic model than almost all composting companies of note in the United States. So Western Pennsylvania is in the bottom 20% of landfill tipping fees. And Pennsylvania is the most landfill friendly state in the United States. So it is very hard to compost here. So AgRecycle has always made 100% of our profit selling compost.
Awesome. That is a great model. I actually love that.
Well, it's a tougher model.
Yeah, challenging.
It is a challenging model, but that is how, we have survived. And I believe, and people who've heard me give a talk say this, I believe the garden product market is a very polarized market. I believe that people buy, products in two different ranges and two different ranges only. So you need to either be the person supplying something that a homeowner wants to buy just to make their yard look decent, or you need to be making a very high-end product that real gardeners and farmers and things want. And there's no middle ground. So people either buy the cheapest thing in my mind, or they buy the best quality they can. I always use sort of the analogy that you need to either decide if you're a box store or Ralph Lauren. Because I truly, have seen, we've all seen a lot of composting companies come and go.
Yep.
And I think that it's because people don't really understand some of the economics of composting, not that they don't understand how to make the product.
Yep, I'm there with you. So what do you sell, I'm skipping ahead now because I'm so curious because 100% of income from the compost sales.
Right.
What is a yard of compost cost from AgRecycle?
So if you pick it up, my cheapest product is $51 a cubic yard.
Yep.
That's my cheapest product.
I'm there with you. My cheapest product is $80 a yard.
Which I looked on your website and thought that was phenomenal, but I think, Rhode Island has a little different dynamic than Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we're definitely a different niche for sure.
Yes.
And so I want to get back to our list a little bit, but can you describe your method of compost making and what the feedstocks are that go into making the compost?
Okay, so we do open windrow composting, and we had the first general permit in Pennsylvania. So we take the broadest amount of materials allowable. So we take yard waste, we take herbivore manures, which are not a large percentage, but we do take some herbivore manures. We take all food waste. We have been taking food waste since 1998. which puts us in a very unique category, I think. We take untreated papers, we take corrugated, and we take certified compostable products.
Okay, I saw that on there. You're kind of a pioneer with those BPI products. That's great.
We are. We have been taking them for a very long time.
Yeah, that's great. I always find the more ingredients that go into making the compost, I find the better it is. So I love seeing a well-rounded source of inputs.
And one of the things that we know, because we've been taking these products for so long, is that I'm not going, this isn't, a podcast on those, but we know two things. One is, if you actually use good science in composting, they 100% break down. But secondarily, we get more food waste. People discount the amount of extra food waste you get when you accept compostable products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are really good thoughts. And are all the feedstocks brought to you, or do you, you pick them up?
So we are a combination. So all of the yard debris that we get pretty much from landscapers is all brought to us. We don't, collect yard waste from people. We do some, little things from municipalities with leaf season, and, we get leaves from municipalities. Yard debris is, unless you are clearing out a lot or doing a special project, 95% of all yard debris we get is brought to us. However, with food, it is just the reverse. AgRecycle was one of the pioneers in doing food waste collection. So 95% of the food waste we get, we collect in our own trucks. And I should say maybe 90%. And then about 10% is brought to us, whether from processors or whether from smaller companies that collect food waste that just don't have the permit to actually compost it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's nice to have the control of you picking up and being able to, their drivers being able to see what they're getting in those
And
trucks.
our drivers absolutely do, because we collect only from the commercial sector.
Okay.
So we are not going to your house.
Yep. It's the schools and universities, like institutions.
So we do 6 of the universities in Pittsburgh, but this is our 16th year doing PNC Park, which is the home of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We have been doing the convention center in Pittsburgh since 1998. We do restaurants. We do a lot of one-off events. So like if you're having a race and, people are throwing oranges on the street, we do festivals. We do a lot of concerts that come to town, because a lot of performers now have in their contract that you have to do an environmental profile, get as close to zero waste as you can. I mean, when, Farm Aid was in Pittsburgh, we did that. So we do a very broad range of collection services.
Okay. You must have a lot of trucks. That was like
actually, and they look like yellow garbage trucks.
Oh, okay, cool. I like the color.
So, the color is, we were the first sort of composter to use yellow, and there's a very simple story. When we started to collect, food waste in the late 90s, yellow was pretty much the only color some waste company wasn't using.
Mm-hmm.
So that is how yellow came, and now yellow is very identified with composting in Pittsburgh. If you see a yellow bin, you know that that's a compost bin.
That's gotten confusing in Rhode Island. There's different colors for compost bins, and it's nice to have a unified yellow. Right. I like it.
Yes.
And then I guess on the flip side, who are your main customers? Who's buying the compost at the end?
So we have a very diverse range of customers. So we sell a Pennsylvania certified organic line that does not have the compostable products in it, that we sell to organic farmers. We sell to traditional farmers, but the bulk of our sales go to botanic gardens, landscapers, and homeowners.
Okay. Do you do bagging as well?
We do not do bagging.
Okay. I was wondering about that.
So, because
That
here's my
simplifies
dilemma.
things. Yeah.
Well, no, I would love to put this. So I'm hoping there is a listener to this podcast that can help me out here, because I've been struggling with this for years. And I know that I am unique in this, in that I am, we're sort of an anti-plastic company.
Yep.
Now, I understand the value of plastic, because if I go to the hospital, that IV bag is important. So I understand that there is a great use for plastics in certain areas. But, plastics to us are a contaminant. Plastic bags doesn't let compost breathe, which is, there are all those wonderful microorganisms in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what does our customer do with the plastic bag? So we have been searching for a very long time for an environmentally product that we could make, we could package this in that allows the product to breathe, but can withstand outside weathering.
I'm right there with you, Carla. We've just been bagging the last 5 years, and I have resorted to plastic. It does have some holes in it, but I don't feel great about it. And I did a tremendous amount of tests beforehand on other things that they just break down so quickly. And
that's it.
The garden centers are not happy with you if your bag breaks down before it's sold.
Right, that's it. The outside weathering component is a very hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
We do sell, so we will deliver, well, we don't pick up at your house. We have dump trucks that we will deliver to homeowners, and we will deliver as little as a cubic yard.
Mm-hmm.
We also sell to 2 garden centers that allow you to bring in a container and they, fill it up, and they charge you on what size container that you have brought in.
Yeah,
and one of them has bags there that, they will shovel it into for you, just for you to get it home.
Yep, that's great.
Our sales yards are truckload lots only. So if you're a homeowner with a pickup truck, we can sell to you.
Mm-hmm.
But we just can't let you come and shovel from a pile. At one point in time we did, and then we had an insurance audit, that there was a person truly putting compost in a bucket for their minivan surrounded by tractor trailers.
Super
and
dangerous.
The guy just said to me, this isn't happening.
Yep. I know.
So so we do have options for people who need smaller quantities.
Yep, they can go to those garden centers. That's great.
Right.
And I guess this kind of feeds in, but this could be a big question. What are your biggest challenges at it sounds like operations, sounds like you have more than one site.
So actually our biggest challenge, and I realize this is going to a national audience, so I'm not going to belabor this, but it is so important that I have to bring it up. Our biggest challenge is Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Pennsylvania is the most landfill-friendly state in the United States. In 1990, when recycling and composting laws came into being, till 2020, the number of landfills in the United States decreased approximately 75%, because people understood, right, this is not the best option for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
In that same time period, Pennsylvania increased the number of landfills by 56%.
It's backwards. Yeah.
The other thing about Pennsylvania is this, because I am not going to undersell the power that waste companies lobbying have with our legislature and regulators, is Pennsylvania will give grants for composting only to the public sector and nonprofits. It is the only state that will not give a private company any grant money to compost.
I find a lot with the grant money too, it's for startup companies and not for experienced composters.
Well, here, it is just not for the private sector at all, which is very telling.
Yes, it really is.
And Pennsylvania only has a yard debris diversion mandate, and it's not that well enforced. So we sell out of product every year.
That's
I make this beautiful product, and we sell out every year. And, we start taking orders in February because people know this. So the single greatest challenge at AgRecycle, with no real diversion mandates, is to get enough feedstock in to meet the demand for finished compost.
Mm-hmm. It's the opposite of most other composters, I find.
Yes.
It's actually the same as our situation at our farm, but I'm so psyched to talk to you because it's so rare. That's what we need more of. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because truly, it is, people think it's a wonderful problem to have, but it's very much a problem.
It's a challenge. Yeah. It's a challenge for sure. And you want those feedstocks. They're good for the world for you to be taking in and making something positive. And you're competing with the landfill. Right. Yep.
And, people are getting it sorted with yard debris, with food waste. One of my, am I allowed to talk about a little pet peeve nationally on a podcast?
Absolutely.
Is, I sit down at a restaurant and I read paragraphs on their farm to table ethos and how sustainable a chef thinks he is buying. But once that plate leaves the kitchen, they don't care what happens to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't finish eating it, they don't really care that it goes into a composting system, which is really ironic because compost is the number one soil amendment used in urban gardens.
It is. I always thought there should be a
disconnect. I mean, we have a little thing on our website and we call it the kitchen door disconnect.
Yep.
That people just don't understand. So how are you really going to get this locally produced organic produce if they don't have access to things like compost?
Exactly. I think there should be, restaurants should start doing farm to table and then table to farm. This loop that goes back, that we can understand that more.
Right. It's always one of those, disconnects with me that people only talk about the front end and not the back end of that problem.
Yeah, I find some of the problem is almost in our terminology. When we're calling it food waste, we think of it as trash. Where if we just call it food scraps or even wasted food, you think of it a little bit differently, and you want to, what's that next step to do with that?
Right.
So,
because on our website, we're very cognizant of that, and we do call it food scraps. Yeah. And, somebody like us, one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is about diverting proteins to a composter.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of research on this. And I can remember 15 years ago, I think it was the state of Minnesota, published an article that, a 5-pound salmon decomposes 300% faster than a single orange in a composting system. Because people forget, and from our experience of taking food scraps for so long, we know that there are two things that the microbes love the best. The protein is one, but sugar's the first.
Easy to break
They
down.
love things with sugar, whether it's a carbohydrate-based sugar or just a plain palm sugar or whatever it is, that the microbes love sugar.
There's so many misconceptions. I always hear people say you can't compost dairy, you can't compost meat, you can't compost grains. I'm like, where are you getting this information from?
Exactly. Exactly. There's so much misinformation about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So any other big challenges at your facility? How's weather? Do you have any, we've talked to some facilities that are super dry and they're struggling with that, or too wet or anything like that.
Well, where we are, we tend to go to the too wet as opposed to the too dry.
Mm-hmm.
So, turning the rows, our turner has the ability to either make the top of the row pointy and conical or flat top it. We rarely have to flat top it because we only do that if we need more rain.
Mm-hmm.
And, people, here's a little tidbit about Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the second wettest city after Seattle.
I did not know that.
No, yes, we are a gray, overcast, rainy, drizzly place.
Beautiful.
And if you've ever watched, a Pittsburgh Steelers football game, you have seen these guys play in serious snow.
Mm-hmm.
So
I find that's harder for odor control when there's that cloud cover.
Knocking on wood, we really don't have odor issues because we've just been doing this for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people don't pay attention to the role temperature plays in odor control.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things where I think that is happening and people are getting very disappointed in the quality of compost they are buying is because the composter didn't pay enough attention to the real science of temperature control. Because there is this new philosophy on hot rot now. And the real science, because you can't cheat science, right?
Nope.
So most of us who take food waste are required that, for the first 15 days, it has to be above 131 F, to kill off the pathogens, right?
Yep.
But then people forget about the role that fungi and actinomyces play in the role of decomposition. So if the temperature gets above 140, it really inhibits them. And if people let the temperature go above 160, most non-spore forming organisms die off. So when you do composting for short periods at these ridiculously high temperatures, that temperature actually, because it's killing off so many sequences of microorganisms, is actually increasing the odor potential at your facility while lessening the product that you're selling because it doesn't have those diverse microorganisms.
That makes a lot of sense. It's those fungi that change the odor too.
Right. So amazing. I think that because, every operator at AgRecycle knows if I see a temperature reading that's 150 or above, they're getting an immediate call from me. Mm-hmm. Why did you let this happen? So I think that there's a trend in composting now that people think they can sort of change the science. I have a tight site. I have been to so many talks where people will tell you that they make beautiful compost, and then from when it comes in to when it goes out the door is 6 weeks. Yeah. And I just sit there with my mouth open because, that's not true. You are making dehydrated brown stuff.
Yeah, you just tried it out. How long was your process? Actually, I didn't get that.
So AgRecycle keeps product on the ground pretty much longer than any composter I have learned. And we have learned that by manipulating the temperatures and keeping them in a prolonged state between 110 and 130, we can actually increase the nutrient content of the compost. So we keep product on the ground between 7 and 11 months.
Yeah, we're tight here. Ours is a 12-month process as well. And I've never talked to anybody that was even remotely as long as that. So I'm super psyched that you guys are in the same school of thought. Right. Yeah.
We are, because that's the active composting. And then, we screen everything. Mm-hmm. And then everything is screened and placed under breathable covers for a minimum of 90 days before we sell it. Mm-hmm. So, the AgRecycle from when something comes in the door to when it goes out is between 12 and 18 months here.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's when you get such higher life forms.
Why people, that's why I think I sell out of product every year, because the compost works. So I think one of the great statistics that a compost company should have is, what is your repeat buying ratio in customers?
That would be excellent. Yeah.
And we track that. I think one of the reasons maybe that Nora suggested that you call me is AgRecycle's very data driven. I have data on everything, and I have decades of data on everything.
That's wonderful. I would love to look through that data. Yeah.
Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. The goal of Notill Growers is to help produce and create valuable niche content like what you're listening to now. We create several different podcasts, from the Winter Growers podcast hosted by Clara Coleman to the Collaborative Farming podcast with host Jackson Roulette and many more. We produce videos at the Notill Growers YouTube channel, including farm tours and crop-specific breakdowns. And our entire model is to create helpful, valuable farming content that is free and open to the public, so anyone, anywhere can use it. So if you appreciate that and our work, or are simply enjoying this show, please consider signing up to be a patron at patreon.com/NotillGrowers. There are also other support options at notillgrowers.com, or you can even purchase a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, because when you purchase it directly from notillgrowers.com specifically, the proceeds go to making you more amazing content like this. Okay, that's my spiel. Thanks, you all. Back to the show.
And so what defines, you're going to know this answer better than anybody else, I feel like, but what defines high quality compost to you?
So performance. It's a very simple answer. It is performance. Because good composts impact the chemical, physical, and biological nature of soil. And if you have a compost that is not positively impacting all three of those aspects, then that is not good compost.
Right on. Yep. And do you have checks and tests? I know it's second nature at this point, but that you conduct to make sure each batch is the same high quality?
We do. Well, I don't know that we send it to one of the land grant universities labs to be tested. But the other thing is that this goes back to something I said earlier. People forget how monitoring temperature and moisture and the CN ratio are important. You can't just make a pile with whatever came in that day. You have to be able to blend a certain amount of food waste and a certain amount of manure with certain portions of the yard waste stream. I always talk about this, composting isn't rocket science, but it's absolutely science. And developing recipes that are uniform and work and that are operator friendly, because, AgRecycle is a smaller company. Composting companies tend to be very equipment intensive and not so labor intensive. So while the person, people take vacations, but when you take food waste, obviously it comes in 52 weeks a year. So, we have systems in place that the fill-in guy who might, be at the distribution center or might be one of our drivers is there, can manage, getting these, compost recipes set so that we do have these uniform products. Because particularly growers and farmers really count on when they buy AgRecycle compost that they are getting the same quality, week in and week out. And I tell people, because we sell some to golf courses, and one of the things, I am ultra conscious of that because it's so great to have them, moving into an organic stream. But I also know, being a golf course superintendent is a very hard job. And they can lose their job if they mess up even a single green.
Yeah. So it's really relying on you to have that product that's consistent. Yeah.
And the other thing about places like where you and I operate, as opposed to being, a composter on the West Coast or in the South, is we have to hit targeted planting seasons.
Yeah, it's challenging.
So
it's
we sell 65% of our compost from March 15th to the 4th of July.
I'm surprised it's not even higher than that. Yeah, that's, I think, I wonder what mine is.
We have sort of trained and exposed. We are very big about educating our customers. And our repeat customers know you get a slightly bigger bang if you till compost in the fall for spring planting.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah.
So we have a lot of people who really know this and do this, and we have a very robust fall sales market here.
That's excellent. I would love to develop that better for ours because it's heavy in the spring, hard to breathe and catch up.
I know. When you apply for a job at AgRecycle, I tell you, if your brother's getting married or someone gets sick, it's fine. But other than that, basically, from March 1st to July 1st, you're not getting any time off. And you're going to get a tremendous amount of overtime.
Yep.
So, that's just the way it is when you live in a regional climate.
Absolutely. I was hoping that cannabis industry, those growers would even out the market a little bit for us because they could buy year round. It's on a 12-week cycle or something, right. But it's not been as market as I had hoped.
Right. So we have a robust fall sales market.
Okay, great. And so what main management practices do you recommend for farmers and composters that want to make the highest quality compost?
One is, the first thing is don't cheat the science. Understand that this is a process that takes time. And I think if that's the mindset, going into it, then you are willing to monitor temperatures and make sure the CN ratios are right. And, watching the moisture content. Because we know that, the best compost is made right around 50% moisture. So I think, when I give a talk to school children, because we do a lot of schools, I equate, compost to baking, because you have to have all the right ingredients and it takes time. I mean, you might want a slice of cake now, but it takes hours to make and cool and ice that cake. So it's a very, I think applicable, but simple analogy to compost. Things just take time and the ingredients have to be right to get the right end product.
Absolutely. I'm excited about the prospect of more farmers making compost because I think that they'll know what they're looking for that high quality. But I 100% agree. You cannot cheat that science.
Right. And the thing about farm composting, at least here, is most of it, the farmers are then using it on, their crops, which is a very nice thing. A lot of times they have to do, like they can't take the feedstocks that I do because they just can't afford to invest in the equipment.
Yeah, it can get pricey. What? So you have windrow turners, and then do you have like front end loaders for?
So we have, when material comes, so we have two different types of grinders that we use. So the grinder that you use for wood waste and yard debris is pretty much useless on food waste and paper and compostable products. And we learned that when we started to take food, in the very late 90s,
Oh, it's been messy. Yeah.
Well, and it's, so obviously the grinder that comes in and, we use for all the yard debris is far more expensive than the very small adapted food mill grinder that we use for, when the food comes in with corrugated and paper. So one of the things that has always amazed me about this is one of the objections people have to taking compostable products is that you have to pre-process them, right? They need a quick grind to break down. And it's always shocking to me that people think that that's such a burden on them to do when they don't mind grinding all the yard debris that comes in. So I don't ever understand why you're willing to grind one thing but not a second thing. A lot of feedstocks need pre-processing. I mean, nobody's throwing logs into their composting pile, right?
No.
So pre-processing is just something we do, and I don't see the disconnect between pre-processing one thing versus another.
Yeah, we don't have any pre-processing because we require everything to already be ground when it comes in. So we have so space limited here, but it sounds like you've got more land.
Well, what we do is actually AgRecycle also has a little different model in that, so our composting sites are not close to the city and they're not close to where landscapers work.
Okay.
So we have a drop-off and distribution center for landscapers to use because they do, urban lawns. So all of the yard debris comes in there. That is where we sell out of, and no composting is done at that facility.
Smart. Okay.
So everything is, so you can drop off, you chopped a tree down, drop it off. Because we then, the grinder then goes there and then, we haul out once it's ground. Because obviously, if you want to haul branches, you're hauling air. And with the price to run a truck, you're going out of business.
Yeah. So
we send the grinder to where the yard debris comes in, which is a totally separate operation from the composting sites that we have.
Okay. Kind of a sister operation. Ties right in. Yeah.
Right. And so, because, my goal is every landscaper that is dropping something off for me, I want them leaving with a truckload of something on the back end. So we make this convenient.
Yeah, that's excellent. Gosh, I feel like there's so many more things I can ask you, and I'm already at my last question. But there's, as you and I both know, there's so many compost facilities that have failed in the time that our sites have been open. And I saw from your keynote a few years back, you had a statistic that 87% of all compost operations in the U.S. that do not receive government subsidies fail after 5 years. 87% was staggering.
That was actually an EPA statistic.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned about how even experienced business owners can misunderstand that uniqueness and challenge of creating a high quality compost.
Well, I think what people misunderstand is the economics of making compost are unique to our industry. And I give an example because here's what people don't take into account: reduction rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a tractor trailer load of food, in the truest sense, after it is composted, you get 2 wheelbarrows of product to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Because food is over 90% water and air. Yet you have had to assign that equipment, labor, overhead, site expense, and all of this. So people don't understand the economics of making something with those dramatic reduction rates. And for yard debris, it's a 7-to-1 reduction. For manures, it's a 40-to-1 reduction. Because in every other business, you're just reconforming a raw product, right? So if, you have a silver ring on, you bought an ounce of silver that you're just reconforming to another thing. There is no reduction rate. Because I think the thing is, people don't understand the economics of making compost because of the reduction rates.
It's complicated because
it is.
Yeah. I think we take in 25,000 cubic yards of material a year, and we make about 6,000 yards of compost.
Right.
So it's very challenging for someone to figure that out, and spatially wise, how to configure that if you're just starting out. So really,
absolutely. Those are, really solid points. And I think people get how to make compost. People just don't get the economics of how to make compost. And the other thing that I never understood, well, I shouldn't say this. I learned this lesson the hard way, but I learned it fast in that people are afraid to reject loads. It costs exponentially more to clean out a load of contaminated compost than you have the responsibility to either recycle the plastic or take the stuff to a landfill than rejecting the load right at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm quick to do that. I'm known for rejecting loads, and the worst is if you get a load of wood chips that has a plastic bag was ground up with it, and it's just these teeny tiny pieces of plastic. There's nothing I can do with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just have to hope it, screens out or blows out.
Yeah, or just reject it in the first place. Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes you can't see it. That's the problem.
It's true. Yeah.
Because, what's on top that you see is not always what's in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that composters sometimes forget to do is operate like other businesses. So for every customer that we pick up, they sign a contract with us. And the contract has basic clauses, like if you cancel, before a year, because we have people sign this, there are penalties for this. If the load is contaminated, we're still charging you because we showed up, even if we reject the load. I think sometimes composters forget to do some of the little business aspects that can help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guilty of that.
Whoops.
It's like everybody in Rhode Island knows everybody in his family, so it's hard sometimes to have those things, but it's just so much more black and white and clear to do that.
Right.
So.
I mean, because it's one of the things, and we really do, we have put a huge educational component. with AgRecycle, particularly with food waste customers or food scrap customers, because we know we're their first time. So one of the things that, we do that I would love to see other people do is when you sign that year contract with it, you get an hour of free consulting time with us. So do you want us to do with that kitchen audit? Do you want us to talk to the staff? If it's a university, do you want us to talk to, the environmental student club, whatever? We give you an hour of time free once you sign that contract and are diverting food waste to us. And we tell you to take advantage of it.
That's excellent. Usually we have people come for a tour here. It's a pretty small state. So then they can see why we can't take in plastics and styrofoams mixed in, but just understand that system. It's helpful to go the other way too. Is there anything else you wished I had asked or want us to know about AgRecycle?
Boy, that's a tough question. Actually, I think the thing about AgRecycle is we don't always get it right, but we always try to get it right.
I love that.
I mean, we have done, throughout, these decades, a lot of trial and error. But the other thing is this. And this, I think, differentiates people. People are always quick to say no. We are always a why not try it as opposed to a why should I try that? So we are very open to working with new feedstocks that come in. I mean, and some of them have been disasters. Like, dealing with off-spec clam chowder is really not a joyful thing to do. And, when you try that, because there's a big soup manufacturer here that, we know that certain things don't always work out. But our approach to dealing with customers is, let us try this. Because I think composters can get into a mindset where they believe they are a compartment unto themselves. And, we would all love to have perfect produce, perfect food scraps diverse, perfect yard debris, all of these things brought to our site in the correct size. But, that's not going to help us divert more from the landfill because that world is a 2% world. So I think we sometimes lose track of the role we can really play if we step it up a little to make a difference in methane production, getting this stuff out of the landfill and remediating soils. As opposed to being closed off, I think we really need to be open to how we can help this whole process. Because, one of the things I always say is how we manage the organic waste stream has the ability to transform American soils from coast to coast.
Absolutely true. Yeah, that's excellent. I feel like you should end with that because that is profound. Yeah, we have a big role to play in saving our climate.
And we can't be persnickety about it. So as long as I think a compost stream isn't contaminated, put a little time experimenting with it. Spend a little investment to see if you can make this work, because then, that opens the door, because if business A is diverting it to you, then business B will divert it to you. I think, we need to take the blinders off a little bit.
Yeah. I'm laughing a little bit because today we're taking in a trial of frozen crab shells. Right. I'm like, let's try it out. Let's see what these blocks of frozen crab shells do. But I feel like they could be a great material. Just might be a little tricky to handle at the beginning.
Right. I mean, because the only thing we don't really take, because we take, almost every single thing in the seafood line, but we don't take anything with, I don't know what the correct term is, like a mollusk shell, like a typical seashell. Like if you are a restaurant diverting with us and linguine with clam sauce is on your menu, the clam shells are one of the few things, and oysters on the half shell. And the reason we don't take this is, again, a lesson learned. They're very highly calcified and eventually they will break down. But during that process, they give every piece of equipment we have a flat tire.
Yeah.
because they are so sharp. I mean, we've all walked on a beach and had that broken shell jab you in the bottom of the foot. So it is one of the, life lessons that we learned. We also learned that, taking tractor trailer loads of bananas turns things to glue unless you mix it with yard debris before processing it. It just is like you've spread glue on all of your equipment. We all learn these little lessons.
Yeah, we do take in shells, quite a bit of clam shells, but we've learned we can't take in mussel shells because they have sharp shards. So
Right.
every compost is going to find these things. We took in tea bags once that did not break down like they were supposed to, and we had one bad batch back in the 90s. But yeah, it is worth trialing and erroring for sure.
Well, tea bags are very interesting because often when we go into a restaurant or even a corporate cafeteria, they tend to have a variety of tea. And most people have tea that's in a paper sachet that they make iced tea from, which is wonderful and fine. But then if you want a cup of hot tea, they give you tea that is in one of those fancy triangular silicone or nylon mesh bags.
Yeah, those are nightmares.
So we always say to them, well, we can take the iced tea bag, but we can't take this. Pretty much we've learned this 100% of the time, they get rid of the fancy sachet one because an employee has to know that a tea bag is a tea bag is a tea bag.
Mm-hmm.
They can't train because there's a lot of turnover in food staff that, a tea bag either is or isn't compostable. We can't say to somebody, hot tea is not compostable, cold tea is compostable in the bags. So they just get rid of it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
They just get rid of it.
Yeah, great.
Because, that's part of, working with the client to help them figure it out.
That's excellent. Well, I'm just tickled to get to talk to you. I feel like I want to talk to you a lot more, and I definitely want to come see your site. Thank you so much for being on the Composter.
It was my absolute pleasure to talk to you today. I love talking about composting.
I love talking to you about composting. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to check out AgRecycle.com. A massive thank you to Notill Growers, Jackson Roulette for his tech patience, Farmer Jesse for his encouragement, and Michael for his editing wizardry. If you are like me and can't help bobbing your head when you hear that musical intro, check out Soulshot at soulshot.net. Thanks to all the Patreon subscribers too. We appreciate you.